Okay, good morning again. Today is still the 10th of February, 2019, and this will be video number 6, part 6 of private versus public. I wanted to get into a few intricate details that we've been observing and learning over the last few months um, or longer that should help people understand their position and what kind of position they need to take concerning public versus private. So you always, always stay in the private. In case you didn't hear that, you always, always, always stay in the private. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, I could give you this explanation. We are a man that work at trade or in trade at the land jurisdiction. And because we are at the land jurisdiction, we are able to work at commerce from the land, but commerce cannot work on the land. So the land can work at the sea because we create the sea, but the sea cannot work on the land. This is extremely important. You cannot be trespassed against by a police officer or a judge. You cannot be trespassed against unless you harm or injure somebody. So, I've given this example before. You're driving down the road, you run over somebody's shrubs, you're liable to fix them. Normally, that's why the state wants you to keep um, insurance on your vehicle. So that's what they claim. Because otherwise they would be liable because they licensed you. So think about that. They licensed you, so they are liable for you because they gave you a license. So they're actually liable for that shrubbery that you ran over. So that's why they want you to have insurance. And without going into a lot of details, that's truthfully the way it works. That's why they have the catastrophic loss fund and things like that. But going past that, I want to give you a few examples of some of the things that we have learned. Uh, so, um, I don't think I mentioned this before. There's a gentleman that I came in contact with who was traveling through another state, and he was pulled over by a police officer, and that police officer came up and he talked with the police officer, and of course the officer didn't know what to do, so he left and went back and got his supervisor. Making a long story short, but he went back and got the supervisor, and the supervisor came up, and when the supervisor got there, the man told him the same thing again. He said he held his license in his hand, and he said, "Look, this does not belong to me. It does not apply to me. It does. I am not a representative of it. It does not represent me. This was created by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. It belongs to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and cannot attach to me. But because it belongs to somebody else, I cannot give it to you. But if you reach in and take it from me, then that would make you liable for its content." And the supervisor just sort of looked, and then he reached in real fast and he stopped before he grabbed it, and he grabbed it and he walked away. And so the cop come back, and the supervisor, they come back, and then he had two citations. And the guy looked at him and said, "You said you would be liable if you took that license and walked away. So you put your name on there because you're liable for it. And so, long story short, the guy said he swore up and down. He said whenever he left that state, that cop was sitting there at the border waiting for him to leave. So, because there's nothing they could do. Um, Another example is another fella got pulled over. He talked with this cop for 2 hours, said all kinds of things to him, and it was just a matter of the fella kept telling the cop that I take the fifth without the assistance of counsel. Well, I take the fifth without the assistance of counsel. And so the guy come up and asks for a driver's license. I take the fifth without assistance. Guy comes back and asks for a registration. Okay, I take the fifth without the assistance of counsel. And the guy was not nice to the cop and didn't need to be. He called him a thug and several other names, and told him he wanted him to take him to jail because he wanted to go to jail because he knew if he went to jail, he said, I have a habeas in the back seat and I'll be out of jail in 2 hours. So you go ahead and you take me to jail. And but he can't get anybody to arrest him because the cops know better. So at any rate, you never make a contract with these people. You stay in the private. Um, I'm not going to go into a lot of the details on all the variations that you can do with traveling. That's for another video. But that's a couple of examples of not giving them the authority, because a Social Security card does not belong to me. It belongs to the Social Security Administration. A driver's license does not belong to me. It belongs to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. That's who created it. So whoever created it, that's who it belonged to. All right. So, at any rate, there's another fella who had had a citation, had gotten a citation, and he went into court. And what he did was, when he made out the paperwork. Now, remember, everybody has to do paperwork. So, when he made out the paperwork, he made it out so that it said that he was the private counsel for the defendant. And long story short, whenever this went up before the judge, the prosecutor stood over there and said, well, is the defendant going to show up today? And the guy, see, because you cannot stand in two different capacities at the same time. So he's standing there as the private counsel. He can't be the defendant because he's the private counsel. He put in the paperwork for being the private counsel, so he can't be the defendant. So the prosecutor is saying, is the defendant going to show up today? And the guy looks right at him and says, well, he says, I don't know. You created him. Is he going to show up today? And needless to say, it was thrown out. There was nowhere to go. There was nothing this guy could do. There's nothing the prosecutor could do because there was no defendant. Because the defendant is the straw man, and the straw man wasn't going to show up. And there was no defendant. There was only a private counsel, independent private counsel. So that's another thing that happened. And so here's another one for the Internal Revenue Service. And I tell people, I said, I can't give legal advice, but if I were to get a letter in the mail, let's say, and the IRS wanted to talk to me about taxes, and so I would grab my stuff, grab my paperwork, take it with me to the hearing. I would ask for a hearing, and I would go to that hearing, and I would take a witness or two witnesses. And then when I get there, I take the fifth without the assistance of counsel. And every question they ask, I can't answer that. I have to take the fifth without the assistance of counsel because I don't have to convict myself. So if it takes 4 hours, it doesn't matter. You just take the fifth without the assistance of counsel. And when they all get frustrated enough, they'll let you leave. So it's your choice whether you live free or not. It's your choice whether you contract with the government or not. But nobody's going to help you because nobody can help you. You need to learn what's going on and stay in the private for yourself. If you try to do this, uh, I mean, if you had a private counselor, that'd be different. So if somebody uh, was private, like this guy goes into court as a private counselor, and maybe he wants to work as a private counselor, and you want to deal with him as a private counselor, you can do that. He's not a public or a bar attorney because they are commercial. And you, as a private man, cannot enter into that commercial world without entering into whatever process they want to put you through. So you need to stay private. So you could have a private counsel, but really that means that you're still dealing with it yourself because you're the living man in that court. Um, I was thinking just a little bit ago. There's another way. I was thinking if I was in court, there's another way. It might be so simple as to just say, well, according to Doan's Associates, the Supreme Court had ruled. Your Supreme Court had ruled that a dead entity is not allowed to talk to a living man. So you're not allowed to talk to me. I'm not in your jurisdiction. These things are not complicated. It's simple that the dead cannot talk to the living. So that commercial process has nothing to do with me. No matter what they do, it has nothing to do with me. So I have to stay in the private, and I cannot go, into their place. So we always have to deal in the private. Um, Let me ask a question. What good does it do to do paperwork and then move into the public? What good does it do to do private paperwork and then place that paperwork into the public? Let me ask another question. What good does it do for you to do paperwork and then to end up in the public? Well, it does no good whatsoever. Does no good. You can't sue these people because you accepted that you were going to be in the public. You accepted that. You didn't do anything about it, so you accepted it. It's the rule is if you don't say anything, then whatever happens is your own fault. That's the rule. So if you go to jail for 30 days and you say nothing about that, it's your fault. So the only thing that you could do about that is if you did say something, then here we go. Now we have something to do. So let's say you get picked up, you stay in the private, you get incarcerated. You don't give them any information. You don't even tell them your name. They just grab your license and assume that you're John Doe Smith because your license says you're John Doe Smith, and they put you in jail. So what do? First thing I do is I call my friend, and my friend comes straight to the jail that day or the next day with a habeas corpus. And we have this paperwork already made up. It's in our classes. If you want to be part of the General Assembly, then you will learn how to do this process. This has been done. It's been activated. Other people have already done this. It was done in other states. So this habeas corpus is given to the warden at the jail or handed in at the jail and told to give to the warden. Now, they have 3 days to act on that habeas corpus. No matter who writes up a habeas corpus or when it's done, you could write up a habeas corpus to get your children back from the Child Protective Services. So even if you did that, they have 3 days to act on it. So let's say you find yourself incarcerated. The habeas is presented, and they have 3 days, and nothing happens. Well, on the fourth day, there's other paperwork that we have that's given to specific people in the military. And when this whole process came down with this fella that I'm thinking about, who lives out in the Midwest, on the fourth day they was treating him badly, in that they didn't want to let him out. They weren't going to do nothing. They were just going to let him rot. And the fifth day, they didn't let him out. They threw him out. They threw him out, and they wouldn't say why, and they didn't talk to him, and they did nothing. They just threw him out. Well, that's because the right people knew the right things to do. And in the General Assembly, in the Republic side, not the National Assembly, but on the Republic side, we have classes and we have paperwork. And if you follow that paperwork, or the process, because it's a process, so you get involved with the process and you understand the process, you stay in the private. And these people in the public, they cannot touch the private. Understand that remember, the commercial cannot enter into the private. They're not allowed. The dead cannot speak to the living. They're not able to. So this one gentleman, the one that I was talking about, who had spent 2 hours with a police officer saying, I'll just take the fifth without the assistance of counsel. Well, that police officer finally got tired and drove away. But he was in another court case where he had, on the public side, the judge ruled in his favor. But the guy wouldn't let it go, so he held the judge to the feet to the fire and said, he wanted to know on the private side what the verdict was, because he was in the private. And you can make a verdict in the public side and you can say no contest and throw it out, but what about the private side? And so the judge actually made a ruling. The judge came back and said, I cannot do anything. I can't make a ruling. I can't touch it. I'm not able to touch it. And they can't. They can't touch anything that's in the private. They can't touch the private because they're not allowed. The dead cannot talk to the living. So the commercial entities cannot deal with the land jurisdiction. That's why a grand jury on the land jurisdiction, when we make a decision to whatever that is, I'm not going to go into any details, but whatever that is, these people over here, they don't have a choice. They have to follow it because this is the law of the land and they cannot rebut it. You, on the other hand, can rebut everything they do. Everything. Doesn't matter what it is. If it's a National Security Act of 1947 that created the CIA, you can rebut that. You can rebut everything that they've ever done because you're on the land. But they cannot rebut anything unless there's harm or injury. So it's that's the way it is. All right. One more thing I wanted to point out was teaching. This is the exact same way that I think that we're going to be teaching people in the future. Is the way that I'm talking right now. Not doing tons of paperwork and things like that for the assembly, but actually learning the philosophy behind why things work the way they do. And I'm already running up to 20 minutes. So join your General Assembly. If you don't join your General Assembly, you have no excuse for getting in trouble with the corporate side. because the General Assembly is where everything's going to take place. This is the grand jury telling the corporate what to do. So go to www.pennsylvaniaassembly.org. That's pennsylvaniaassembly.org. And go to the contact page, contact me. I will get you in touch with your state assembly as soon as I can. It might take a day or it might take a few days. You never know when I can get back to my email. So within reason, we'll get back to you. And hey, have a wonderful day.